وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ومن آياته خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم إن في ذلك لآيات للعالمين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات ديجي محمد وعلى Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As requested, please recite one more Surah Fatiha for all the marhumeen. Their names were mentioned, especially Dr. Ghulam Fatima, daughter of Muhammad Qasim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Continuing with our discussion and the commentary of the Risalat Al-Huquq, we were talking about the third attribute or the third haqq that Imam ﷺ has mentioned, that is the right of the tongue. He says, وَأَمَّا حَقُّ اللِّسَانِ فَإِكْرَامُهُ عَنِ الْخَنَاءِ وَتَعْوِيدُهُ عَلَى الْخَيْرِ وَحَمْلُهُ عَلَى الْأَدَبِ. He said, the right of the tongue is that you consider too noble for obscenity, accustom it good, direct it to politeness, do not use it except in situations of needs and benefits. We shed some light on this aspect, quoting some ayat of Quran, especially the verse that I recited initially today from Surah Rum, verse number 22, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also states that among His signs is the creation of heavens and earth, and the variations in your languages and your color. Verily, in that are the signs for those who take heed, or those who know. Continuing in what we had talked about last week, we reached a point where we were discussing some of the aspects which corrupts the tongue, because Imam is talking about the right of the tongue. Here, let's just focus a little bit briefly, as usually I don't take that long in Shab-e Jummah program. What are some of the things and the factors that go ahead and corrupt the tongue? Researchers in ethics say that there are causes which corrupt everything, and therefore tongue is not exception to that. Tongue also gets corrupted. Many things will corrupt it. Nearly 20 causes have been mentioned as far as the corruption of the tongue is concerned, but we'll mention a few over here so that at least those things which are affecting us on a daily basis, Imam is trying to point out over here under the light of the ayat and hadith, maybe we can abstain from those things. First thing that these scholars of ethics, they mention is that corrupts the tongue, they say talking in vain. As you heard in the verse that I also recited, that Imam also mentions in the segment, among the things that he's mentioning is talking in vain. That which does not concern you, that which does not benefit you, do not proceed and do not talk about that. Talking in vain will only waste our time and is one of the causes of the corruption of the tongue. That's why Rasulullah said, min husn al-Islam, min husn Islam al-mar'i, tarkuhu ma la yu'nih. He said one of the signs of the excellence of a Muslim's submission towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is his leaving what does not concern him. Whatever does not concern you. Amir al-Mu'mineen also mentions in Nahj al-Balagha, da'il qawla fima la ta'arif. Stay away from that qawl which you do not have knowledge about, which you do not know, which does not concern you. You're from the medical field. What does it have to do with the, I don't know, computer field? If you want to say something, you are a scientist. What does that have to do with the fiqhi masail, for example? So do not concern yourself in the things that do not matter to you, or matter to you, but you do not have enough knowledge about those things. And that's why Rasulullah also said, "A'zamun nase khataya yawm al-qiyamah, aktharuhum khawdan bil batil." He said the greatest in sins on resurrection day are those who have delved the most into wrong. How? كُنَّا نَخُوضُ مَعَ الْخَائِضِينَ. You know this ayat from chapter number 74, verse 45. It says, among the things that these people mention, Quran also refers to as, is that we used to gossip along with the gossipers. We used to indulge into vain conversation, vain talks, which did not concern us with those who were talking about it. Salman al-Farisi also mentions, he says, the most sinful people on the resurrection day are those who have spoken the most in disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If he did not put that condition at the end, in disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will be going ahead with those who come and speak from the podium, the speakers. You speak a lot, you say a lot, you talk a lot. Well, in disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions as a condition, those who speak in disobedience are the ones that are being mentioned over here. So the first element in corruption of the tongue is talking in vain, talking too much, talking about that which does not concern you. That leads towards the corruption of the tongue. Second, which is similar to that, is excessive talking. Now there's a difference between vain talk, because you're indulging in conversation which is wasting your time. At the second point, you're excessively talking. You're talking too much. That also sometimes ends up corrupting the tongue. It says in a hadith by Rasulullah, he says, Tuba liman amsaka al-fadla min lisanihi wa atlaqa al-fadla min malihi. He said, blessed be the one who restrains his tongue from excessive speech and gives his excess wealth in charity to the needy. Yeah, you want to use something excessively, use your wealth towards helping the poor and the needy. But don't use your tongue towards these causes excessively, because then you will not be among those people who can refrain from corrupting this tongue. The more you talk, the more that comes out of the tongue. Last week also mentioned a hadith by Amirul Mu'mineen, in which says, Al-mar'u tahta lisan, makhbu'un tahta lisanihi. Every mankind is hidden beneath their tongues. As soon as they speak out right away, you know good or bad things about that individual. As long as they don't say anything, you do not really know if that person is good or if they have any bad characteristics. Going through this very quickly, the third is arguing. It says arguing and teasing are factors that will also corrupt the tongue. Islam has ordered us not to argue, since it is blameworthy. The noble Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he said, La tumari akhaka wa la tumazihhu wa la ta'idhu maw'idan fatukhlifhu. He said, do not argue with tease or break the promise you have made with your brethren. A servant cannot refrain, or servant cannot attain full faith unless he quits verbal arguments, even if that person is correct. So even if you're on haqq, even if you're correct in what you're saying, but if you're having this verbal argument, Rasulullah is telling you to refrain from it, because the more you indulge into this verbal argument, it will lead towards the corruption of the tongue. In another place, Rasulullah says, whoever knows he is right but quits arguing shall be given a residence in a heavenly place. Even though you know that you are right, even though you know that you are correct, you're on a haqq, but you still stop arguing and you stay away, Rasulullah says you'll be given a residence in a heavenly palace or a place. Whoever knows that he is wrong and quits arguing shall be given a residence in a low heavenly place as well. So both people are benefiting over here, even when you are correct and you refrain from it, and even when you are wrong and you refrain from it, more so. Both are going to be enjoying as far as the benefits and the favors that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give this individual. Fourth thing which leads towards the corruption of the tongue is the verbal abuse. It's a verbal abuse or expression of animosity to get one's right or property is another factor that corrupts the tongue. Again, we see that all of these incidents that Prophet we are mentioning over here, the ulama akhlaq have mentioned, they have been backed up by the ahadith by Rasulullah. Over here, Rasulullah says, Man jadala fi khusumatin bighayri ilmin, lam yazal fi sakhatillahi hatta yanzir. He said, whoever argues in a dispute without true knowledge shall remain subject to God's wrath until he desists. So we see that even this verbal abuse a person uses, towards another individual, obviously sometimes it does not, or majority of the time, it is something which is, as a human being, without referring towards any religious script, you're told that it is not something which is correct. Even psychologists will say, well, verbal abuse, abusing someone, even verbally, is more damaging sometimes than abusing someone. God forbid that anyone goes and abuses someone physically, because the verbal abuse, the way it will leave its prints on the body of insan, it might not be physical imprints, but it will be on the soul of insan. They'll have more effect on this individual than those things which are left through the physical abuse. Salawat Beji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Thus the Prophet instructs all Muslims to be polite in speech and do not use bad or obscene language. Muslims are instructed to attract other people's love and friendship by using good words. Unfortunately, this is not the message that is getting out to the masses, that what the teachings of Islam are, what the teachings of Rasulullah are, that as far as speech is concerned, this is the method that has been mentioned. This is the methodology which has been laid down by Islam, not the one that is being portrayed around the globe these days. Fifth thing that leads towards the corruption of the tongue is swearing. Swearing is considered bad, obviously, in Islam, and it is among the factors of corruption. It says, Al-Jannatu haramun ala kulli fahishin an yadkhulaha. Heaven is forbidden upon the one who curses. He cannot enter that heaven. It's forbidden upon him. It says, haramun ala kulli fahishin. Why? Because it is something which not only that you are swearing upon this individual, not only that you're hurting this individual, and we'll mention later on as to why, because you're hurting the heart of another individual. That itself is haram, let alone the words that are coming out of your tongue. So there are two effects of it. One, you're hurting another person's feeling. Secondly, you're corrupting your own tongue. So there are two effects in it. That is why Rasulullah is saying, even this in regards to that heaven is forbidden upon the one who curses. In another instance, Rasulullah was talking to Aisha. He says, "Oh Aisha, if swearing could appear an embodiment, or it could be given a body like a man, it would be a very evil man. It could not be a good man. It could not be someone you would look upon or you would want to be associated with. It would be a very evil phase." Swearing is defined to be the expression of vulgar things. One who swears is trying to hurt the other person, and as I mentioned before, hurting others is certainly forbidden. It may be the result of associating with bad people who use this type of language. This is also has been declared bad in Islam. Avoid the company of the bad. If you can't change them, then just leave the company of those individuals. Yes, if there could be a positive effect by you onto them, then there's nothing wrong being with them. But if you cannot convert, if you cannot change their way of talking or change the way of their thinking, then it is best to leave the company of those individuals. An Arab came to see Rasulullah, and he said to him, "Oh Rasulullah, please give me some advice." Prophet said, "If I advise you, will you act upon it?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I advise you to fear Allah. If someone blames you for what is in you, something that you already have, that quality you possess, or that bad characteristic that you possess, do not blame him for what you know that may lie in that individual." So even if you know about that individual, whatever is in him, do not say it. Thus he will suffer from the ill consequences of his deeds, and you will prosper from your good deeds. Let me repeat this so it makes more sense. It says, وَإِنْ إِمْرَأٌ غَيَّرَكَ بِشَيْءٍ يَعْلَمُهُ مِنْكَ فَلَا تُغَيِّرْهُ بِشَيْءٍ تَعْلَمُهُ فِيهِ يَكُنْ وَبَالُهُ عَلَيْهِ وَأَجْرُهُ لَكَ. He said, I advise you to fear God. If someone blames you for what is in you, do not blame him for what you know that may lie in him. He said, thus he will suffer from the ill consequences of his deeds, and you will prosper from your own good deeds. Also, never insult any of God's creatures. It includes all the other creatures as well. It doesn't only mean the mu'mineen. It does not mean the Muslimin. It does not mean human being. Actually, it goes beyond the human beings as well, not to insult them. And so the man took Prophet's advice, and he never swore at anyone after that. We learn that traditions like these, and even to the extent we hear a story by Shahid Behishti. I don't know how many of you heard his name. He was among the martyrs of the revolution. That once he was in Russia, and he was walking down some place with his companions, with his friends, and among the people that was with him, they saw there was a grave of one of the either communist or Marxist individual. It was a grave of this individual over there. And this person who was walking along with them saw a dog walk by towards the grave. And he said, this dog is going to recite the Fatiha or recite something for this individual. Look, the dog is visiting the grave of that communist. Shaykh Behishti, it is mentioned in his khatirat that he turned around and he said to this individual that yes, we have differences with those people, but it does not give us the permission to go ahead and abuse them verbally or to swear upon them in this fashion the way you have just done so. Although they might be against us, although they might be the same thing that Amir al-Mu'mineen is mentioning in Nahj al-Balagha as well, that when in Safin some of his companions were swearing against the people of Muawiyah, Imam went up to them and said, don't. He said, Inni akrahu an takunu min sabbabin. It is a matter of disliking that you be swearing or cursing at those people who are standing against us. People said, oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, are we not on the right path? Are we not on haqq? He said, yes, you are. Are they not on batil? He said, yes, they are. You are Ali, he's Muawiyah, we are on the right path, they're on the batil. Still you don't. He said, no, don't mention it. Don't mention these things. Don't say bad words or verbal abuse or fahish or curse or any of those sort of things. Why? If you mention their ahwal, what they're really doing, it might bring a change into them and there might not be a war altogether. Imam is actually looking for a means to avoid the war. But if you keep on mentioning these negative things, it will actually increase in their animosity and the war will end up happening. And therefore, this person, we learn another tradition that a person by the name Ayaz ibn Samar told Rasulullah that, O Prophet of God, a relative of mine who is lower than me in rank swears at me. Should I swear at him in defense? Rasulullah replied by saying, Al-mutasabbani shaytanani yata'awanani wa yatahatarani. He said, whenever two people revile or insult one another, they're like two shaitan. They become like two shaitan when they're, insulting one another, working together in disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by making false accusations against each other. The reason they're stopping us from all of this is because once the conversation gets heated up, the arguments gets heated up, then you forget about the real mas'ala, then you go into the tangents and you start attacking individuals on their personal basis. And this is where the corruption of the tongue plays its factor and it comes in. Sixth is cursing. Cursing is also another factor that corrupts the tongue. Whoever curses other is pushing them away from the circle of God's mercy. This issue has been referred to several ayat of Quran. God has cursed many and has deprived them of His mercy. An important case is that of shaitan. First creation that God sends His la'nat upon is shaitan. He says, وَإِنَّ عَلَيْكَ لَعْنَتِ إِلَىٰ يَوْمِ الدِّينِ. And indeed my curse will be upon you until the day of retribution. Now this issue of cursing, this is something which we really don't need to elaborate. We all teach, even our children from the very beginning. It doesn't have to be a Muslim parent to teach the children that cursing is bad, so we're not going to delve too much into this. But one aspect of it, so we understand that yeah, cursing to someone else is definitely something which is not allowed, but you and I should not become the objects or the subjects of the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah sends la'nat upon individuals. So we should not be the recipient of the la'nat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Among the people who are mentioned to be the recipient of the la'nat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is those who break ties with the family, are the ones who are twice or three places in Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends His la'nat upon these individuals. One instance is in Surah Muhammad, verse number 22 and 23. It said, may it not be that if you were to wield authority, you would cause corruption in the land and ill-treat your blood relations. They are the ones whom Allah has cursed. These are the people Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent upon them His la'nat. So those people who do qati rahim, those people who break off their ties, are the people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends His curse upon, or His la'nat upon. So yes, you and I abstain from cursing, but we should also be those who abstain from being the recipient of the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We see that in the events of Karbala, even when this qafila was moving along, jab ye ja rahe the اور چل رہا تھا یہ قافلہ, کس طریقے سے ہر موقع پہ کس طرح کے الفاظ ان کے سامنے پیش کیے گئے. یہ گھر اس خانوادے کا نام ہے جو رسول اللہ کے گھرانے کا نام ہے, اہل بیت ان کا نام ہے, اہل بیت کے گھرانے سے ان کا تعلق ہے, لیکن جس طرح کے الفاظ ان کے سامنے استعمال کیے گئے, آپ اور ہم شریف انسان بھی کوئی اس طرح کے الفاظ سننے کا عادی نہ ہوگا. کس طریقے سے ابن زیاد نے الفاظ استعمال کیے ہیں, کس طریقے سے بے حرمتی کی ہے ابن زیاد جیسے شخص نے, کس طریقے سے بے حرمتی کی ہے یزید جیسے شخص نے, لیکن اس کے باوجود آپ دیکھیے کہ جناب زینب, جناب ام کلثوم, امام سجاد نے کس طریقے سے ان کے جوابات دیے ہیں. کسی جگہ پہ بھی اس طریقے سے کوئی آرگیومنٹ نہ کیا ہو, کوئی گالی نہ دی ہو, کسی پہ لعنت نہ بھیجی ہو, کوئی کسی بھی طرح کی وربل ابیوز نہیں استعمال کی, چونکہ یہ وہ لوگ ہیں جن کے لیے خدا خود کہتا ہے انما یرید اللہ لیذھب عنکم الرجس, خدا ہی ہے جنہوں نے ان کے اندر سے رجس کو دور کر دیا ہے. یقیناً یہ اسی گھرانے سے تعلق رکھتے ہیں. اس میں اگر ایک شخص معصوم ہے تو سب کے سب اس سے اس عصمت کا استفادہ کر رہے ہیں. اسی لیے آپ دیکھیے جناب زینب کی عظمت کہ ان مشکل حالات کے باوجود, جن مشکلات سے جناب زینب گزر کے آئی ہیں, اب بھائی کے گزر جانے کے بعد سے زینب کی ذمہ داری ہے تمام بچوں کا خیال رکھنا. ان مصائب کو جھیلتے ہوئے جناب زینب نے ایک ماں ہونے کی حیثیت سے بھی اس کا حق بنتا تھا کہ اپنے بچوں پہ گریا کرتی, اپنے بچوں کے سروں کو دیکھتی تھیں نیزے کے اوپر بلند, لیکن جناب زینب گریا نہ کرتی تھیں. یہاں تک کہ جناب زینب شام پہنچ گئیں. شام میں جب وہ آخری مجلس کا اہتمام کیا گیا, کہتے ہیں کہ شامی عورتیں بھی آ گئی تھیں, ایک ایک کر کے سر لائے جا رہے تھے. کہا تمام سروں کو جب رکھ دیا گیا اور جب رخصت لینا چاہی اہل بیت نے, تو ایک جب گریا کر رہے تھے تو جب حسین کا سر آیا تو زینب نے اپنی آغوش میں لے لیا, جب عباس کا سر آیا تو ام کلثوم نے اپنی آغوش میں لے لیا, ارے جب قاسم کا سر آیا تو ام فروہ نے اپنے ہاتھ میں لے لیا. ایک ایک کر کے سر آتے تھے, ایک ایک بیوی پکڑ لیتی تھی, اپنے آغوش میں لے لیتی تھی. لیکن شامی خواتین سے بھی نہ رہا گیا. دیکھا دو ایسے ننھے سر ہیں کہ جو سر ایک جگہ پہ رکھے ہوئے ہیں, کنارے میں پڑے ہوئے ہیں, اور کوئی ان پہ گریا نہیں کر رہا ہے, کوئی خاتون بڑھ کے اس کو نہیں اٹھا رہی ہے. پوچھا رہا نہ گیا, ایک دفعہ پوچھ اٹھیں کہ ارے ان کا کوئی دیکھنے والا نہیں ہے, ان پہ کوئی گریا کرنے والا نہیں ہے کہ کوئی ان پہ آنسو بہا سکے. زینب کیا جواب دے گی؟ ایک دفعہ کہا ہوگا کہ ارے یہ میرے بچے ہیں, یہ میں ان پہ گریا کرنے کے لیے تیار ہوں, لیکن میں اپنے بھائی پہ گریا کروں یا میں اپنے بچوں پہ گریا کروں. کہتے ہیں یہ قافلہ بڑھتا ہے, شام سے آگے نکلا, کربلا سے گزرنے کا ان کو حکم ہوا, بلکہ انہوں نے خواہش ظاہر کی کہ ہم کو کربلا کے راستے سے گزارا جائے تاکہ ہم شہداء کی زیارت کر لیں. ایک دفعہ پہنچتے ہیں کربلا میں, مصائب سب آپ نے سنے ہوئے ہیں, بس تذکرہ دوبارہ سے تاکہ یہ تذکرہ تازہ ہوتا رہے. آنسو خود بخود آنکھوں میں آ جاتے ہیں. ایک دفعہ کربلا سے گزر رہے تھے, دوبارہ ہر بیوی نے اپنے شہید کے اوپر, اپنے شہید کی قبر کے اوپر اپنے آپ کو پہنچا دیا. تمام بیویاں گریا کر رہی ہیں. جب اب یہاں سے چلنے کا وقت آیا, تمام بیویوں کو راضی کیا گیا کسی طریقے سے یہاں سے چلیں, تو ایک دفعہ جناب زینب کہتی ہیں کہ بیٹا سجاد, میں نے تمام بچوں کو اکٹھا کر لیا ہے, میں نے تمام بیویوں کو اکٹھا کر لیا ہے, لیکن ایک بیوی نظر نہیں آتی ہے. ارے یہ رباب کہاں چلی گئیں؟ رباب نظر نہیں آتی ہیں. کہا میں جانتا ہوں جناب رباب کہاں ہوں گی. جب جناب رباب کے پاس پہنچے ہیں, وہ ننھے علی اصغر کی قبر کے اوپر موجود تھیں. کہا اے رباب, چلنے کا وقت آ گیا ہے کہ آپ نہیں چلیں گی. رباب نے جواب دیا, میری بیٹی شام کے زندہ میں رہ گئی, میرے شوہر امام حسین اس کربلا میں رہ گئے, میرا ننھا علی اصغر اس کربلا میں رہ گیا. اب میں مدینہ جا کے کیا کروں گی؟ الا لعنۃ اللہ القوم الظالمین وسیعلم الذین ظلموا ای منقلب ینقلبون. بار اللہ ہماری سے بات قبول فرما, ہم گناہ گار ہیں, ہمارے گناہوں سے درگزر فرما, ہمیں اہل بیت علیہ السلام کے نقش قدم چلنے کی توفیق عطا فرما، ہمیں ان کی تعلیمات پر عمل کرنے کی توفیق عطا فرما، ہمارے امام کے ظہور میں تعجیل فرما، ہمیں ان کے اعوان و انصار میں شمار کر، ایک دفعہ سورہ فاتحہ کی تلاوت کر کے ان تمام مرحومین کی روح کو ایصال کر دیں۔ بسم اللہ الرحمن